A case of the great American contradiction, dream or nightmare. The first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, are recognized by most Americans as a pillar of the American dream. Clearly worded and profound, the 8th Amendment illegalizes cruel and unusual punishment. Surely trapping humans in 6 by 8 foot cells for 23 hours a day with only food to eat that a dog wouldn't even touch qualifies as cruel and unusual. But the suffering only begins in the prisoner's cell. Victims of solitary confinement develop ruinous mental issues during their time in solitary and in the outside world. The perpetuation of this despicable practice is not only inhumane, it is unconstitutional. Therefore, the federal and state governments should legislate towards restriction and eventual termination of the practice. The first step is to educate the U.S. population on the reality of solitary confinement. First, the imposition of solitary confinement affects not only adult prisoners. Over 15% of incarcerated juveniles have been held in solitary, according to Ian M. Keisel in an opinion piece for the New York Times. They have been as young as 10 years old and usually are held from 3 to 6 months. Young inmates need physical and mental room for rehabilitation and growth, and being trapped in a tiny cell for 23 hours a day sabotages any chance of that. Proof of this lies in this sad statistic. A Justice Department review of suicides in juvenile facilities found that more than half of the minors who had killed themselves had done so in isolation. And how has the government taken action? Not yet has any state nor the federal government banned the solitary confinement of teens in adult jails and prisons. Restrictive legislation is exigent because ending what can really be defined as torture will statistically result in less teen suicides and a happier youth. Furthermore, the numbers on mental health are equally staggering. A 2003 study done by psychologist Craig Haney quantifies the effects of solitary confinement. He interviewed 100 randomly selected inmates at Pelican Bay, a supermax prison in California. 70% reported being on the verge of a nervous breakdown. 40% experienced hallucinations, and a third admitted to suicidal thoughts. These are not ordinary, expected symptoms of imprisonment. Haney affirms that they are far more severe than what prisoners experience in general population prisons. Moreover, a study from Florida conducted by Daniel Mears found that 24.2% of inmates committed a violent crime 3 years after release from solitary confinement, in contrast to 20.5% of inmates who were imprisoned in general population prisons. Ergo, solitary confinement is completely counterproductive. Isolating prisoners does not rehabilitate them, it debilitates them. Still, the study is not perfect. One may reasonably assume that inmates who are exiled to solitary confinement are sent for being violent or a danger to other inmates. For that to be true, one would have to also assume that the U.S. prison system is just, logical, and regulated. It is not. And while many of the 61,000 people who are right now, at this very moment, trapped in solitary cells, were condemned for violence against guards or other inmates, the vast majority were put away for trivial reasons: talking back, refusing to obey an order, failing to report to school or work, etc. Prisoners in solitary confinement are not especially more malicious nor dangerous than their prison mates. These specific prisoners are quicker to commit a violent crime outside of prison, not because of who they are, but because of the person solitary confinement has made them become. There are a multitude of reasons. 1. The cells themselves are beyond heinous. Here is a sketch of Bill's cell, a mentally ill inmate held in solitary for months and deprived of medication and treatment for his bipolarity. Look at the sketch. 3 small meals are served every day, one at 4 a.m., one at 10:30 a.m., and one at 4 p.m. The bed is a thin 1-inch mattress on a cinder block. The window is small and damaged. For most other inmates, their cells are even smaller and completely windowless, devoid of light. Inside their cages, these humans are bereaved of basic human needs: sunlight, fresh air, and most importantly, social interaction. According to Steinhardt of NYU, social contact is a psychological stimulus vital for humans' health. In her research, she concluded that inmates in solitary confinement also experience physiological symptoms, such as chronic headaches, trembling, sweaty palms, extreme dizziness, and heart palpitations. Especially within their first 3 months in solitary confinement, inmates generally lack an appetite and go through dramatic weight loss. A solitary cell should not be a sentence for the deterioration of mental and physical health, but at its current conditions it is. What's even worse is the sad life the convicts live inside their cages. Being alone for sometimes years on end in the dark unsurprisingly drives the inmates crazy. One prisoner who was held in solitary confinement for 22 years and developed severe agoraphobia eloquently expresses the effects of the inhumane imprisonment practice. He would live in fantasies and literally forgot he had a family. He described the feeling as nothingness, emptiness. And how does he explain how he felt when he was taken out of solitary confinement and thrusted into a general population prison? To the guards, he's a guy who they'd thrown away but were now picking up out of the garbage can. To the American prison system, he's a pest. He's not a person. But don't forget the other 61,000 prisoners withering away in solitary confinement cells at this very moment. They're humans, and they deserve to be treated like humans, like Americans. Its reign of terror on young and old, on threatening and benign, needs to cease in America. For solitary confinement is a creation of an evil imagination, not a product of an egalitarian democracy.